My name is James Clayton Dink Holland, and I was born in 1924, June 25th. My parents is Reuben and Fanny Holland, and I had 9 brothers, 4 sisters, and 5 of those brothers went and served our country. 2 of us fought in World War II. My brother older than me fought in Italy while I was in France. Same time, he got wounded real bad. Later on in the years, he died from his war wounds. I went on stayed in France for a good while, was just a holding force. We landed there in July, right after D-Day, on Omaha Beach. The war had moved back into France, but a lot of the equipment was still sitting there burning because smoking and all that. The next day we were there, we caught up with the war, and we could hear the bullets flying when we got up to the front line, and that was kind of scary to listen to. We relieved a British tank division who was General Montgomery, a British general, who was his outfit and his army. We moved on back, as soon as we was out, just a little while, we started moving on back into to France to push the Germans back. We came upon this road bed, which was had the hedgerows on each side of it. My buddy and I, at night, we dug us a foxhole up into the bank of that hedgerow. I dug on one end far enough for me to get up and lay down in, and he dug his on the other end, and just a hole right in the middle for it to come out. We stayed there for about a week or so. My buddy was 18 years old. He just came out with a replacement. He'd had 13 weeks of infantry training. One night he got out of his foxhole and walked down he walked down the street a little way. He come back up the street, and the boys on guard duty halted him and asked for the password, and for some reason he didn't give the other password for him to enter. So the boy turned a BAR on him and just blew his whole chest apart. He fell almost over the top of the foxhole where I was, still asleep. When I heard the machine gun, I knew something happened, so I got out and looked to see what happened. The boy on the post had gone back to the CP. An hour later, I watched him die. He was a good friend. We stayed there a couple of more weeks, and we moved on up farther into France. We caught up with the war, other part. We went on up into northern France. Thanksgiving, we had about a week's break and camped out in a big field in pup tents. We stayed there through Thanksgiving, about 4 or 5 days. From there, we moved on up into Germany. Then we caught up to the war again, and that was after the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge lasted all January. And we was in it then for good. We started fighting our way on up into Germany. And the last battle we was in was, we come up to this little town. We were supposed to take that little town, and the other battalion of the 94th Division was supposed to come up on the side of us and take that part. Well, they didn't make it for some reason, and we got surrounded where we couldn't do no farther. So we stayed in there 3 days, just holding them back. And every night, the 88s would just cut the tops out of the trees every night. It was terrible. I was in a trench on guard duty the last night, on Sunday night, Saturday night it was. And this old man, the guy was on the sentry duty with me. He had to leave, and I left me by myself. And I sat there a little while, stood there a while, and old man, looked like he had a kind of a long beard, and I don't know if it must have been, he looked old to me, but he probably was, because most of them, GI did look old. And he stood up a little while, and he gets so nervous, started crying, and I told him, I said, well, just go ahead and sit down, and I'll take your place. He sat down, and all he did for the rest of the night, as long as he was there, just was praying all night. I turned around after a little while after he sat down there, and he was gone. I never did see him after that. I don't know what happened to him. But next morning then we had to start, the lieutenant who was in charge told us we had to try to make our way back to our lines. Well, we was already in these communication trenches that we started back down the trenches. And there's so many soldiers laying out in the field all around in the woods. That's a bunch of them. You could barely walk without stepping over them or stepping over them. While we was going down the ditch, one of my friends was walking right behind me, and the 88 shell burst right up over top of us, and he got hit in the forehead with a big piece of shrapnel, and it killed him right instantly. The boys kept going on down the ditch, and my good friend, Jason, was his name, got down to where we had to get out of the ditch and go through what they call the dragon's teeth. It's big cement things about 3 foot tall and about so big from the top, looked like a big tooth. And there's miles of them. They kept the vehicles out. Anyway, my friend Jason jumped up out of the ditch and run across through the dragon's teeth up to a brick building, which the rest of them was going into. And I seen him fall about halfway across, and he had been hit real bad. And he was my friend. I jumped out and went right behind him, and I fell right. My head was right beside his feet. Right, had one of those big posts right beside of me. I heard the machine gun start again. I know it was probably meant for me because I was the last one that went down. But it hit him and just tore his whole body apart. And I sat there and watched him die. He was another good friend. We went on out into the building where we were supposed to gather. All of us got in there could. And the lieutenant had the scouts to try to get out the back door to see if they could get out to our lines and come and give us some help. Well, they made it just out the door, and that was one of those machine guns got them both it's outside the door. Then this lieutenant said, we have to fight our way out or surrender. And there was no way we could get out of that because they had already been put mortar shells all around the building, just exploded all around it. They didn't put one on the building, but they put it around it where they let us know that they had control of it. Well, he asked us if we could, and all of us who wanted to surrender or who didn't. All of us agreed to go ahead and surrender. It was either surrender or die. We had some German prisoners with us, so he had one of them to go out to the German lines out where the machine guns, all the people were, to see if we could surrender. And he came back and told us to come out with our hands over our helmets, not have any weapons or anything. We had to lay down all our weapons, everything we had, pocket knives, anything that would look like a weapon. They marched us out through the snow and the ice, out the upside of the old wagon road, which was, they had machine gun lined up all up on the side of it there, and lined us right up in front of it. And I thought we was done for right then. But we stayed there for a few, 30 minutes or so. They decided they were going to march us on up to a big fence they had out sitting out in the middle of the field, nothing but ice and snow in it. This fence is about 10 foot tall with barbed wire across the top of it. We stayed there for about a half an hour or so. And they caught us, put us in this old building for the night. That's where we stayed that night. And we hadn't had any food for 3 days since on Friday. And they gave us some kind of old soup. I don't remember what it was, but I had to eat it out of my old steel helmet. Next morning, after we left there, the next morning, they put us out on the wagon road. They told us we had to do a lot of marching that day, so the government had issued us galoshes, rubber boots to go over our shoes, and because some of our shoes had holes in the bottom, but it had been so long we couldn't get the shoes to us. So the Germans told us, after they had us all gathered up, to pull those shoes off and boots off, said you can't march with all them today, so you have to pull them off, and we'll put them on a truck and bring them up to you when we get where we're going. Well, we pulled them off, set them out there, and they sat down and started picking out their size and put them on. So we was left with bad shoes. I got frostbite feet that day. From then on, we marched all day that day. Marched till we got to a big brick building which had been a train station before, but it was full of old GI, probably maybe 500 in there. We stayed there about half a day, and this train with old boxcars pulled up outside out there, and the old boxcars were just what they called the 40 and 8. They started loading us in there, and the reason they call it the 40 and 8 is because they could put 8 horses in there or 40 men. And they put us, the 40 men, they put us in there, and the train looked like as far as you could see for putting prisoners in there. We stayed in there a whole week with just very little bit of bread and water. And it was very unsanitary in there because there had been horses there sometime before. And nothing on the floor, not even straw, anything like that, just a plain old dirty floor. They had a big old can over to the door we had to use for a bathroom. My buddy and I remember his name was John Baker. He lived in Asheville. And I have not had contact with him in a long time. But we stayed together all the time. We was in POW in the boxcar. And at night, I would lay on my left side and he would lay on his right side. And I'd put my head on his, facing each other. I'd put my head on his leg there and he'd put his on my leg. And that's the way we had to sleep, to get a little sleep and stay warm. Well, we stayed in the train for, like I said, a boxcar a whole week. Finally come to a place where they stopped and let us out. And over behind it, I seen the place where they had put all the Jews to death, the gas chamber, the very huge thing, but had lots of little tube about so long hanging, hundreds of them hanging down. And had one big door there where you could see most of it. I thought this was going to put us in there too, but I was glad when the old German soldier told us to turn right. We did, started marching down the railroad. That was a relief. We marched all day that day and got to a POW camp where they put us in this one big barracks, all Americans in our barracks. That we had some good neighbors. The Polish was on one side of us and the Indians was on the other side. The Hindus, what we called them, were very friendly people. They'd do anything for you, and so did the Polish. I had a pair of combat boots that had the things around the top that you could cut them off. It made them combat boots. And I one day carried them over to Polish barracks, and they had some food that they would trade for certain things. And I traded them old boot tops for a little jar of jelly. I traded my, I traded my wife had given me an identification bracelet sometime before, and I traded that for something. I don't remember what it was for, but she had gave that to me, and maybe it was for the jelly that I got. I can't remember. But in a way, that could have been what saved my life, just one little jar of jelly. We stayed at that prison camp till May 8th. During the time we were there, we lost a lot of boys. Some of them was wounded real bad and had carried to the little hospital they had. Didn't have not much more than aspirin. But they stayed in there a while. And one of my good friends who was slept in the bunk right below me, died of starvation. That was about a week before we was liberated. The next day, they brought him down the street in a hearse, kind of a wagon made into a hearse, and two beautiful black horses pulling it, and a German soldier in full uniform was driving it. Behind it, there was a priest with his Bible, a squad of German soldiers who was marching at attention, and I thought that was a good thing they did for him. But up on top of his casket or box, whatever he was in, laid the American flag. And I hadn't seen the American flag. I hadn't seen it for a long time since I was before I was POW. We were liberated about May the 8th and went to Oxford, England, to the 91st General Hospital. I stayed there about a week, 2 weeks. I came home, and about 2 weeks later, me and my wife got married, July the 15th. That's been 62 years ago. And I still love her just as much as ever. She has been my whole life. We have 3 sons, Jimmy, Bobby, and Jeff. We have 4 grandchildren, 3 granddaughters, a grandson, 2 great-granddaughters, 1 great-grandson. We live in 821 Kenwood Drive in Burlington, where we've been for 49 years now. And I am proud to have been. I am proud that I went and helped fight for my country. The 5 boys who went in service, I mentioned earlier, my brother and I went in to fight for freedom. The other 3 went in after the war to help protect it. God bless America.
Dink, if you will, tell me a little bit about what you learned from your service time. What lessons have you taken through life?
I learned to love my country, one thing. That's the best thing, I guess. I still try to do a lot to help with our flags. I'll go, if American Legion, we have, in 48, we have an honor society, I'm in that, and we go to every school and every first grade in Alamance County every year, and have a flag program, put it on for the children, first grade only. Give them a little flag after we're through. And we do that for 26 first graders every year. We have been for a few years now, and that's been going on for several years. But I've only been in it for about 3 years now, and I love doing it. And I have a lot of respect for my flag, a lot of respect for our country.
You learned a lot about discipline.
Discipline, yes sir, I did. A lot about that. And
that's changed into a sharing where you feel a need.
Right.
to, you gave a lot,
Yes.
but you're giving a lot now.
Yes, sir.
And that's good.
And I'm also a member of the Honor Guard, American Legion, who does flag program for all veterans who are buried now. Some of them don't want it. A lot of them do. We've done several of them for the last 2 or 3 years. So I've enjoyed doing that, and I appreciate. I have a lot of respect for them because they gave their life, part of their life, for their country.